in a distant corner of the galaxy, far from Earth and its familiar blue skies, humanity's first interstellar warship drifted silently through the cold void of space. The USS Dauntless was a marvel of engineering, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. Its sleek, metallic hull shimmered faintly under the light of a nearby star, and its engines hummed with quiet power. On board, Captain Ryan Hughes stood on the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the vast expanse of stars visible through the large viewport. He was a man in his late 40s, with graying hair and a calm demeanor that masked the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders. The mission of the Dauntless was simple, yet monumental: explore uncharted regions of space, establish contact with alien civilizations, and secure humanity's place among the stars. It was an ambitious goal, but one that Earth's leaders believed necessary for survival. For centuries, humanity had looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. Now, they had their answer, and it came with both opportunities and challenges. Lieutenant Karen Blake sat at her station on the bridge, her fingers moving quickly over the glowing console in front of her. She was the ship's science officer, a brilliant young woman in her early 30s, with a passion for discovery. Her dark hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and her focused expression betrayed no hint of the excitement bubbling inside her. Today, something unusual had caught her attention. A faint signal, almost imperceptible, had appeared on her sensors, a signal that didn't match any known patterns. "Captain," she said, turning to face Hughes, "I'm picking up an anomaly ahead. It's small, maybe the size of a shuttlecraft, but it's emitting energy signatures I've never seen before." Hughes raised an eyebrow. Could it be debris, or perhaps a natural phenomenon? Karen shook her head. "No, sir. This is definitely artificial. Whatever it is, it's not random. It's moving toward us at a steady pace." The captain nodded thoughtfully. "Let's keep our distance for now. Raise shields and prepare to scan it. I want to know what we're dealing with." As the crew sprang into action, tension filled the air. Encounters with alien technology were rare, and each one carried risks. Humanity had made contact with several extraterrestrial species over the past few decades, but not all encounters had been friendly. Some aliens viewed humans as primitive newcomers, while others saw them as potential threats. Still, exploration was part of the mission, and the crew of the Dauntless was trained to handle whatever the universe threw their way. Karen adjusted the settings on her console, directing the ship's powerful sensors toward the approaching object. The readings came back slowly, painting a clearer picture of what they were facing. "It's some kind of probe," she announced after a moment. "Cylindrical shape, about 10 meters long. Definitely alien design. There are markings on its surface, symbols, possibly writing." "Any signs of weapons?" Hughes asked, his voice steady but cautious. "Not that I can detect," Karen replied, "but there's a lot of energy building up inside it. It's hard to tell exactly what it's doing." Before anyone could respond, the lights on the bridge dimmed slightly as the ship's quantum shielding system activated automatically. This advanced technology was one of the Dauntless's most prized features, designed to protect the vessel from unknown threats by creating a barrier of distorted space-time around it. While effective, the system was also experimental, and even its creators admitted they didn't fully understand how it worked. The probe continued its approach, ignoring repeated attempts by Communications Officer Daniel Carter to establish contact. Daniel, a tall man with sandy blonde hair and a patient smile, tried every frequency and protocol he knew, but the probe remained silent. "No response, Captain," he reported finally. "Whatever it is, it doesn't seem interested in talking." Hughes frowned. "Keep trying. Let's not assume hostility just yet." By now, the probe was close enough for the crew to see it clearly on the external cameras. Its smooth, metallic surface gleamed ominously, and the strange symbols etched into its sides seemed to pulse faintly with an inner light. It hovered motionless for a moment, then suddenly began emitting a bright beam of energy directly at the Dauntless. "Shields holding," called out Lieutenant Greg Miller, the ship's chief engineer. He was a burly man with short brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude. "But this thing is hitting us with something we've never encountered before. It's like it's probing us." "Probing?" Hughes echoed, his tone sharp. "What do you mean?" Greg glanced at his console, his brow furrowed. "It's scanning us, sir. Not just visually, it's penetrating our systems, trying to access data. I don't think it's looking for communication. It's looking for information." Kira's eyes widened as she processed this revelation. "If it gets through our defenses, it could compromise our entire database. Weapons specs, navigation logs, everything." Hughes clenched his jaw. "We can't let that happen. Shut it down." Karen immediately initiated countermeasures, sending pulses of interference to disrupt the probe's scan. But instead of retreating, the probe increased its output, flooding the Dauntless with waves of exotic energy. Alarms blared across the bridge as the ship's systems began to falter. Lights flickered, consoles sparked, and the hum of the engines grew uneven. "It's destabilizing the quantum shield," Greg shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "If it collapses, we're exposed. Reroute power from non-essential systems," Hughes ordered. "Do whatever it takes to stabilize the shield." The crew worked frantically, their movements precise and practiced, despite the chaos unfolding around them. Karen monitored the probe's activities, her mind racing as she tried to anticipate its next move. "It's adapting," she said grimly. "Every time we block it, it changes tactics. It's learning." Just when it seemed the situation couldn't get worse, a deafening crack echoed through the ship. The quantum shield collapsed under the strain, leaving the Dauntless vulnerable. A surge of energy coursed through the vessel, knocking out several critical systems and sending crew members sprawling to the floor. Smoke filled the air, and sparks flew from damaged equipment. On the main screen, the probe exploded in a burst of light, its once sturdy frame disintegrating into fragments that scattered into the void. Silence fell over the bridge as the crew struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Had they destroyed it, or had it self-destructed? Captain Hughes straightened, brushing dust off his uniform. His face was pale but determined. "Damage report," he barked. Greg wiped sweat from his forehead as he scanned his console. "Shields are offline, and we've lost primary propulsion. Life support is stable, but we'll need time to repair the damage." Karen stared at her own screen, her hands trembling slightly. "Sir, I think we did more than just disable it. Look at these readings." She pointed to a series of erratic spikes on her display. "When the shield collapsed, it created a feedback loop with the probe's energy field. That's what caused the explosion. But there's something else. Our systems, they've been altered." "Altered?" Hughes demanded. "How?" Karen hesitated, unsure how to explain what she was seeing. "I don't know yet, but whatever the probe was trying to do, it left traces behind. Fragments of its code, or maybe its consciousness, are embedded in our systems now." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. No one spoke as the implications sank in. They had survived the encounter, but at what cost? And who or what had sent the probe in the first place? As the Dauntless drifted helplessly in space, its crew faced a daunting reality. They were pioneers, explorers, venturing into the unknown. But the universe was vast and unpredictable, and not everything welcomed humanity's arrival. The probe's destruction was only the beginning of a story that would ripple across galaxies, shaping the future of interstellar relations, and perhaps determining whether humanity belonged among the stars at all. The silence on the bridge of the USS Dauntless was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of damaged systems struggling to reboot. Smoke still lingered in the air, and the metallic scent of burnt wiring filled everyone's nostrils. Captain Ryan. Hughes stood at the center of it all, his sharp eyes scanning the faces of his crew. Despite the chaos, they remained focused, working quickly to assess the damage and stabilize the ship. Yet, beneath their calm exteriors, there was an undeniable tension. Something about the probe's destruction felt wrong. Karen Blake sat, hunched over her console, her fingers flying across the controls as she analyzed the strange energy traces left behind. Her face was pale, her expression one of deep concentration. She had never encountered anything like this before. The fragments of Kodor, whatever they were, seemed to pulse faintly within the ship's systems, almost as if they were alive. It wasn't just data. It was something more complex, something that defied easy explanation. "Captain," Karen said finally, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "The probe didn't just scan us. It tried to interface with our quantum shielding system directly. When the shield collapsed, it triggered a feedback loop that destroyed the probe, but not before embedding pieces of its own programming into our systems." Hughes frowned. "Can you remove it?" Karen hesitated, glancing up at him. "I'm not sure. These fragments are integrated too deeply. If I try to delete them without understanding what they do, I could damage critical systems or worse, cause another collapse." Greg Miller, the chief engineer, leaned over her shoulder, studying the readouts. His broad shoulders slumped slightly as he processed the information. "So we're stuck with alien malware now." "Great. Just what we needed." "It's not malware," Karen corrected sharply. "At least, I don't think so. This isn't random or malicious. It's structured, like it's trying to communicate." "Communicate?" Greg scoffed. "By blowing itself up and leaving junk in our systems." "Yeah, real friendly." Before Karen could respond, Communications Officer Daniel Carter spoke up. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission, not from the probe it's gone, but from somewhere nearby." Hughes turned toward him. "Source?" Daniel adjusted his headset, his brow furrowing as he listened intently. "It's coming from a fleet, a large one. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies, but the language matches the symbols we saw on the probe." The room fell silent again. Everyone knew what this meant. Whoever had sent the probe was here and they weren't happy. "Put it through," Hughes ordered, stepping closer to the main screen. Static flickered for a moment before resolving into an image of an alien figure. Its body was sleek and insectoid, with shimmering exoskeleton plates and multifaceted eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen. Behind it, rows of similar creatures moved efficiently around a command center filled with glowing consoles and pulsating machinery. The alien spoke, its voice distorted, but clear enough to understand, though the words were translated automatically by the ship's universal translator. The tone was unmistakable. "Anger. You have destroyed our probe," the creature began, its mandibles clicking audibly between sentences. "This act of aggression will not be tolerated." Hughes raised a hand to interrupt. "We did not destroy your probe intentionally. It attacked us first, attempting to breach our defenses. We acted in self-defense." The alien tilted its head, a gesture that might have been curiosity or skepticism. "Your claim is irrelevant. The probe was conducting routine reconnaissance. Your interference has disrupted vital operations and caused significant loss." Karen leaned forward, her voice urgent. "Routine reconnaissance. That thing wasn't just scanning us, it was hacking into our systems. If we hadn't stopped it, who knows what damage it would have caused." The alien's gaze shifted toward her, its eyes narrowing slightly. "Your technology is primitive, yet dangerous. Such reckless behavior threatens the stability of this region. You must answer for your actions." Hughes stepped back in front of the screen, his posture firm. "We're willing to negotiate, but make no mistake, we came here peacefully. We seek cooperation, not conflict." The alien paused, considering this. After a long moment, it replied, "Negotiations may proceed, but know this. Further incidents will result in retaliation. Withdraw your vessel immediately and await instructions." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. No one moved for several seconds, the weight of the alien's words sinking in. "Well," Greg muttered, breaking the quiet, "that went well." Hughes ignored him, turning instead to Karen. "What do you think? Are they telling the truth about the probe being harmless?" Karen shook her head slowly. "I don't know, sir. Their definition of routine might be different from ours. And those energy traces, they're still active. Whatever they were doing, it wasn't just reconnaissance." Hughes nodded grimly. "Then we need to figure out exactly what we're dealing with, fast." Over the next few hours, the crew worked tirelessly to repair the Dauntless. Propulsion systems were brought back online, though at reduced capacity, and life support stabilized. The quantum shielding system, however, remained offline, a fact that worried everyone. Without it, the ship was vulnerable to any potential threats. Karen spent most of her time poring over the alien fragments embedded in the ship's systems. She isolated them in a secure subsystem, creating a virtual sandbox where she could study their behavior without risking the rest of the ship. What she found was both fascinating and alarming. The fragments weren't static. They were adaptive, constantly shifting and reconfiguring themselves. At times, they seemed to interact with the ship's software in ways that suggested intelligence. "It's like they're learning," Karen murmured to herself as she watched the patterns unfold on her screen. "But why? What are they trying to achieve?" Her thoughts were interrupted by Ambassador Laura Dawson, who entered the science lab carrying a datapad. Laura was a seasoned diplomat in her mid-50s, with short silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She had been assigned to the Dauntless specifically to handle situations like this one of the few humans. A board trained in interstellar relations. "I hear you've made progress," Laura said, pulling up a chair beside Karen. "Anything useful?" Karen sighed, rubbing her temples. "Not really. These fragments are unlike anything I've ever seen. They're not just code, they're alive, in a way. And they're interacting with our systems like they're trying to understand us." Laura frowned. "That doesn't sound good." "It's not," Karen admitted. "But it's also not necessarily bad. If they're trying to learn, maybe we can use that to our advantage. Maybe we can communicate back." Laura considered this for a moment. "Do you think they'll listen?" "I don't know," Karen said honestly. "But we have to try. Right now, we're sitting ducks out here. If we can establish some kind of dialogue, even on a technical level, it might buy us time." As the two women discussed their options, the Dauntless drifted closer to the alien fleet. Through the viewport, the massive ships loomed ominously against the backdrop of stars. Each vessel was sleek and angular, bristling with weapons and glowing with eerie blue lights. They radiated power and danger. On the bridge, Hughes monitored their approach, his jaw tight with determination. He had faced difficult situations before, but this was different. These aliens, whoever they were, clearly viewed humanity as a threat. Convincing them otherwise wouldn't be easy. "We need to prepare for the worst," he told his crew. "Arm the weapons, but keep them powered down unless absolutely necessary. We're here to talk, not fight." "Yes, sir," replied Lieutenant Sarah Bennett, the ship's security officer. She was a wiry woman with sharp features and a steely gaze, known for her quick reflexes and unshakable loyalty. Under her supervision, the defense teams readied themselves for any contingency. Meanwhile, Daniel continued monitoring communications, hoping for another message from the aliens. When it finally came, it was brief and direct. "Prepare to dock. A delegation will board your vessel." Hughes exchanged a glance with Laura. "Guess we're about to find out what they want." As the Dauntless maneuvered into position alongside the largest alien ship, the crew prepared for the arrival of their visitors. Tension crackled in the air, mixing with a sense of anticipation. For better or worse, humanity was about to take its first step into a new chapter of galactic diplomacy. When the airlock hissed open and the alien delegation stepped aboard, clad in sleek armor and flanked by armed guards. Every human present felt the weight of history pressing down upon them. This encounter would shape not only the fate of the Dauntless, but also humanity's place among the stars. And none of them, not Hughes, not Karen, not Laura, could predict how it would end. Document Part 3 of the story. The airlock doors slid open with a soft hiss, and the alien delegation stepped onto the USS Dauntless. Their movements were precise and deliberate, each step echoing faintly in the narrow corridor. The leader of the group stood slightly taller than the others, its exoskeleton gleaming under the ship's artificial lights. Its multifaceted eyes scanned the surroundings with an intensity that made everyone uneasy. Behind it, two smaller aliens carried strange devices that pulsed with a faint blue glow. Weapons, perhaps, or tools for scanning. Captain Ryan Hughes stood at the head of the human welcoming party, flanked by Ambassador Laura Dawson and Lieutenant Karen Blake. His posture was rigid, his expression calm but firm. Despite the tension in the air, he refused to show fear. This was diplomacy now, not combat, and every move mattered. "Welcome aboard the Dauntless," Hughes said, his voice steady. "I am Captain Ryan Hughes, commander of this vessel." The lead alien tilted its head slightly, its mandibles clicking softly as it processed the words through the universal translator. "I am Zilla, envoy of the Xylathian Collective. Your actions have brought us here. Explain yourselves." Laura stepped forward, her silver hair catching the light as she nodded respectfully. "We understand your concerns, Envoy Ziller. The destruction of your probe was unintentional. It attempted to breach our systems, forcing us to act in self." Ziller's gaze shifted to Karen, who stood silently beside Laura. "You are responsible for analyzing the fragments left behind." Karen hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes, I've been studying them to better understand what happened. They're complex, unlike anything we've encountered before." Ziller's antennae twitched slightly, a gesture that might have indicated interest or suspicion. "Your species is young, yet you wield technology far beyond your understanding. Such recklessness endangers others." Hughes interjected quickly. "We're learning, Envoy. Humanity is new to the stars, but we seek peaceful cooperation. We didn't come here to cause harm." Ziller's response was cold and measured. "Peaceful intentions mean little without control. Your interference disrupted vital operations. Reparations must be made." "Reparations?" Laura asked cautiously. "What exactly are you asking for?" The alien envoy gestured with one clawed limb toward the glowing devices held by its companions. "Your quantum shielding system, the source of the disruption, must be deactivated indefinitely. Further scans of your technology will also be prohibited until assurances can be given regarding its safety." The humans exchanged uneasy glances. Deactivating the quantum shield would leave the Dauntless defenseless against any potential threats, but refusing the demand could escalate tensions further. Hughes cleared his throat. "Deactivating our shield permanently isn't feasible. It's essential for our protection. However, we're willing to discuss limitations on its use during diplomatic engagements." Ziller's eyes narrowed. "Your reluctance confirms our suspicions. You value your security over galactic stability." Laura raised a hand, trying to steer the conversation toward compromise. "Envoy Ziller, we share your concerns about stability. Perhaps we can work together to ensure both sides feel secure. For example, we could allow supervised inspections of our technology to demonstrate transparency." Before Ziller could respond, one of the accompanying aliens stepped forward, holding up one of the glowing devices. It emitted a series of rapid beeps, and Ziller turned to listen intently. After a brief exchange in their native language, Ziller addressed the humans again. "Our instruments detect residual energy within your systems, the remnants of the probe. These fragments pose a risk. They must be neutralized immediately." Karen stiffened. Neutralizing the fragments meant deleting them entirely, which could destabilize the ship's already fragile systems. She glanced at Hughes, silently pleading for guidance. Hughes met her gaze briefly before turning back to Ziller. Neutralizing the fragments may damage our ship. We need time to assess the risks fully. Ziller's tone hardened. Time is a luxury we cannot afford. If the fragments remain active, they could trigger another catastrophic event. Do you wish to repeat the incident that destroyed our probe? The room grew tense. Everyone knew Ziller had a point. The fragments were unpredictable, but giving in too easily might set a dangerous precedent. Humanity couldn't afford to appear weak, especially so soon after making contact with such an advanced civilization. Laura took a step forward, her voice calm but firm. Envoy, Ziller, let us propose a solution. Allow our science team to isolate the fragments and study them under controlled conditions. If they prove hazardous, we'll neutralize them ourselves. In return, we'll provide full transparency about our findings. Zilla regarded her for a long moment, its expression unreadable. Finally, it nodded once. Very well, you have one cycle of your Earth day to resolve this matter. Failure to comply will result in consequences. With that, the alien delegation turned and exited the room, their footsteps fading as they returned to their ship. The humans remained frozen in place, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Once the airlock sealed shut, Hughes exhaled sharply. That went about as well as expected. Laura crossed her arms, her lips pressed into a thin line. They're testing us, pushing boundaries to see how far we'll bend. Greg Miller, who had been standing quietly in the corner, spoke up. Bend too much, and we snap. Stand too firm, and they crush us. Fun spot to be in. Hughes ignored the comment, turning instead to Karen. How bad is it? Can we stabilize the fragments in 24 hours? Karen shook her head slowly. I don't know, sir. These things are adaptive. They keep changing. Every time I think I've got a handle on them, they shift again. It's like they're alive. Laura frowned. Alive? You mean sentient? I'm not sure, Karen admitted. But they're definitely intelligent. Maybe even trying to communicate. Hughes rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. Great. Just what we need. Dalian malware, with a personality. Despite the grim humor, the situation was dire. If the fragments couldn't be stabilized, the Xylithians would likely take matters into their own hands, and humanity's first major diplomatic effort might end in disaster. Over the next several hours, Karen and her team worked tirelessly in the science lab, isolating the fragments and running simulations to predict their behavior. The glowing patterns on her screen danced erratically, shifting and reconfiguring in ways that defied logic. At times, the fragments seemed to mimic the ship's systems, integrating seamlessly with certain functions. Other times, they resisted analysis entirely, creating feedback loops that threatened to crash the entire network. It's like they're learning from us, Karen muttered, watching the patterns evolve, adapting to whatever we throw at them. Daniel Carter joined her, bringing a fresh cup of coffee. So, what you're saying is, we've got alien tech that's smarter than us. Karen managed a tired smile. Pretty much, except it's not just tech. It's something else entirely. As the clock ticked down, the crew braced themselves for the worst. The Xylithians had made their demands clear, and failure to meet them would come at a cost. Yet, removing the fragments outright felt wrong, not only because of the potential damage, but because they represented a unique opportunity to learn more about the aliens. Technology. By the time the deadline approached, Karen had managed to stabilize the fragments temporarily, locking them into a secure subsystem where they could do no harm. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it bought them some time. When Ziller and the delegation returned, Hughes presented their findings, emphasizing humanity's willingness to cooperate while maintaining control over their own systems. To everyone's relief, Ziller accepted the compromise for now, but as the aliens departed, leaving the USS Dauntless adrift in space, One thing became painfully clear: humanity's journey among the stars would be fraught with challenges. The probe incident had opened a Pandora's box, raising questions that no one was prepared to answer, and somewhere deep within the ship's systems, the alien fragments continued to pulse faintly, their purpose still unknown. The hours following the Xylithian delegation's departure were tense aboard the USS Dauntless. Though the immediate crisis had been averted, the crew knew they were far from safe. The alien fragments embedded in the ship's systems remained, an enigma ticking clock waiting to either unlock answers or unleash chaos. Captain Ryan Hughes paced the bridge, his mind racing with possibilities. Every decision he made now could shape not only the fate of his crew, but also humanity's. Standing among the stars. Karen Blake hadn't left the science lab since the aliens departed. Her workspace was cluttered with holographic displays and blinking consoles, each showing streams of data that flickered like fireflies in the dark. She leaned closer to one screen, her eyes narrowing as she studied the patterns of the alien fragments. They pulsed rhythmically, almost hypnotically, their behavior shifting unpredictably. At times, they seemed benign, merely observing the ship's systems, without interfering. Other times, they probed deeper, testing boundaries and pushing limits. "It's like they're curious," Karen murmured to herself, jotting down notes on a tablet. But curious doesn't mean harmless. Greg Miller entered the lab, carrying a tray of food. He set it down beside her workstation and crossed his arms. "You've been at this for 12 hours straight. When's the last time you ate something?" Karen glanced up briefly, then returned her focus to the screen. "I don't know. Maybe yesterday." "Greg, look at this." She pointed to a section of the display where the fragments had begun interacting with the ship's navigation system. "They're not just copying our tech, they're adapting it. If I didn't know better, I'd say they're trying to improve it." Greg frowned, leaning over to examine the readouts. "Improve it? That sounds helpful, not dangerous." "It would be if we understood what they're doing," Karen replied sharply. "But we don't, and if they make changes we can't reverse, it could destabilize the entire ship." Greg sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "So what do we do? Keep them locked up in that subsystem forever?" "I wish it were that simple," Karen said, shaking her head. "Every time I try to contain them, they find a way around it. It's like they're learning from every attempt we make to control them." Her voice trailed off as another thought struck her. What if the fragments weren't just pieces of code left behind by the destroyed probe? What if they were something more, remnants of the probe's consciousness, or even part of its mission? The idea sent a chill down her spine. If true, it meant the Xylithians hadn't been conducting routine reconnaissance at all. Their probe had been searching for something specific and, whatever it was, it might still be buried deep within the Dauntless systems. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Hughes met with Ambassador Laura Dawson to discuss next steps. The air between them was heavy with unspoken concerns. Laura sat at the conference table, her silver hair catching the dim light as she reviewed the latest reports. Her expression was grim but resolute. "They gave us a temporary reprieve," Laura said finally, breaking the silence. But Ziller wasn't satisfied. "You saw how rigid they were about deactivating the quantum shield. They see us as a threat, whether we like it or not." Hughes nodded, leaning forward with his elbows on the table, "And they're right to a point. Our technology is advanced, but we barely understand it ourselves. To them, that makes us unpredictable." Laura tapped her fingers against the datapad in front of her, "Which brings us back to the fragments. We need to figure out exactly what they are and why they're here. Until we do, we're walking blind into negotiations." "That's easier said than done," Hughes admitted. "Karen says they're adaptive, intelligent. Trying to remove them outright could cause more harm than good." "Then we let her keep studying them," Laura suggested. "But we also prepare for the worst. If the Xylithians decide we're too risky to leave alone, they won't hesitate. To act. Hughes exhaled slowly, running a hand through his graying hair. Agreed. In the meantime, I want everyone on high alert. No unnecessary risks. We stick close to the fleet and avoid drawing attention. As they finalized their plans, Daniel Carter approached the pair, holding a small device in his hand. His face was pale, his usual calm demeanor replaced by visible unease. "Captain, Ambassador, I think you should see this," he said, placing the device on the table. "It's a recording from the communications array. Something picked it up while we were dealing with the fragments." Hughes and Laura exchanged wary glances before turning their attention to the device. Daniel activated it, and static crackled briefly before resolving into a distorted transmission. The voice was unmistakably alien, though different from the Xylathians. Its tone was urgent, almost frantic. "To any who receive this message, the Xylathians cannot be trusted. Their probes are tools of domination, designed to steal and replicate your technology. Resist them, or you will lose everything." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. Hughes broke the quiet first, his voice low and measured. "Where did this come from?" Daniel hesitated, clearly unsettled. "Unknown. Origin. It came through on an unsecured frequency, encrypted in a way I've never seen before. Whoever sent it used sophisticated cloaking techniques to mask their location." Laura leaned back in her chair, her brow furrowed. "This complicates things. If the Xylathians are lying about their intentions, we're in deeper trouble than we thought." Hughes stood, pacing the length of the room. "Or it could be a trick or ploy to turn us against them. Either way, we can't afford to jump to conclusions. But we can't ignore it either," Laura countered. "If there's even a chance the Xylathians are using their probes to exploit other species, we have a moral obligation to investigate." Hughes stopped pacing, his gaze locking onto hers. "And risk starting a war. We're outnumbered and outgunned. One wrong move, and we'll end up like that probe scattered across space." Laura held his gaze, her resolve unwavering. "We're explorers, Ryan. That means taking risks. But it also means standing up for what's right. If the Xylathians are exploiting others, we can't sit idly by." Hughes clenched his jaw, torn between caution and conviction. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. We'll dig deeper, but carefully. For now, we focus on the fragments. They're our best lead." Back in the science lab, Karen worked late into the night, her exhaustion forgotten in the face of discovery. As she analyzed the fragments further, she uncovered something startling. Hidden within their adaptive patterns was a sequence of symbols that matched those on the destroyed probe. But these weren't random markings, they formed a coherent message. "Greg," Karen called out, her voice trembling with excitement. "Come look at this." Greg hurried over, peering at the screen. "What am I looking at?" "The fragments aren't just code, they're communication," Karen explained, pointing to the sequence. "This is a message, written in the same language as the probe's symbols. It's faint, almost buried, but it's there." "What does it say?" Greg asked, his curiosity piqued. Karen shook her head. "I don't know yet. I need more time to decode it. But if I'm right, this could tell us exactly why the probe targeted us and maybe even what the Xylathians are really after." As dawn broke over the distant horizon of a nearby planet, the crew of the USS Dauntless prepared for another day of uncertainty. The alien fragments continued to pulse faintly within the ship's systems, their secrets tantalizingly close yet maddeningly elusive. Outside, the vastness of space stretched endlessly, filled with both wonder and danger. For now, humanity's place among the stars remained precarious, a fragile thread hanging by the decisions of a single crew. And as the sun rose on a new day, the weight of those decisions rested heavily on their shoulders. The next morning aboard the USS Dauntless began with a sense of urgency that permeated every corner of the ship. The discovery of the hidden message within the alien fragments had reignited hope among the crew, but it also brought fresh challenges. Decoding the symbols would take time they weren't sure they had. Meanwhile, tensions with the Xylithians loomed large, and the mysterious transmission warning against them added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Karen. Blake sat hunched over her console in the science lab, her eyes glued to the glowing patterns on the screen. The symbols she had uncovered were unlike anything humanity had encountered before. They pulsed rhythmically, almost as if they were alive, shifting subtly whenever she tried to isolate them for analysis. It was maddening yet fascinating, puzzle that seemed designed to resist being solved. Greg Miller stood nearby, watching her work with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You've been staring at those things for hours," he said finally. "Take a break. Your brain's going to short circuit if you keep this up." Karen shook her head, without looking away from the screen. "I can't. Every second counts. If I don't crack this soon, we might lose our chance to understand what's really going on." Greg sighed, scratching his stubbled chin. "Fine, but at least let me grab you some coffee. You look like you're about to pass out." Reluctantly, Karen nodded, leaning back in her chair for the first time in hours. As Greg left the lab, she rubbed her temples, trying to ease the tension headache that had settled behind her eyes. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her. She knew the crew and, perhaps all of humanity, was counting on her to unravel the mystery of the fragments. But the more she studied them, the more questions arose. When Greg returned with 2 steaming cups of coffee, Karen accepted hers gratefully and took a long sip. The warmth helped clear her mind slightly, and she turned back to the screen with renewed focus. Slowly, painstakingly, she began piecing together the meaning of the symbols. Each one represented a concept or idea, layered with context that wasn't immediately obvious. It was like trying to read a book written in a language she only partially understood. Hours passed, and just as frustration threatened to overwhelm her, something clicked. A pattern emerged, a sequence of symbols that repeated in different parts of the message. Carefully, Karen cross-referenced them with data from the probe's wreckage and the energy traces still embedded in the ship's systems. Her heart raced as the pieces started to fall into place. "Greg," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "I think I've got something." Greg rushed over, nearly spilling his coffee in his haste. "What is it?" "It's not complete yet, but it's starting to make sense," Karen explained, pointing to the screen. "These symbols, they're instructions, not just random data. They're telling us how to use the fragments." "To use them?" Greg echoed, his brow furrowing. "Use them for what?" "I'm not sure," Karen admitted. "But it's tied to the quantum shielding system. Whatever the probe was doing when it interfaced with us, it wasn't just scanning, it was upgrading." Greg's eyes widened. "Upgrading, as in making it better?" "Potentially," Karen replied cautiously. "But there's more. The message also warns about risks, about the potential for instability if the process isn't controlled properly." Before Greg could respond, the lab door slid open, and Captain Ryan Hughes entered, followed by Ambassador Laura Dawson. Both looked exhausted, but determined. "How's it going?" Hughes asked, his tone brisk. Karen straightened in her chair, pushing strands of hair out of her face. "Sir, I think I've made progress. The fragments contain instructions, possibly a way to integrate them safely into our systems. But it's risky." Hughes exchanged a glance with Laura, before turning back to Karen. "Risky how?" "If we follow the instructions wrong, it could destabilize the quantum shield or worse. Compromise the entire ship," Karen explained. "But if we do it right, it could give us an edge. The upgrades might make our technology more efficient, maybe even stronger." Laura stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "And what does this mean for the Z? Do you think they sent the probe specifically to steal our TIC to improve it?" Karen hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know yet. But based on the message, I think their intentions were more complex than we assumed. This isn't just about theft, it's about adaptation. They wanted to learn from us, but they may have underestimated the risks involved. Hughes folded his arms, his gaze fixed on the screen. So we're sitting on a double-edged sword. Use the fragments, and we risk blowing ourselves up. Ignore them, and we miss out on a potential advantage. Exactly, Karen confirmed. And there's no guarantee the Zalithians won't come back demanding answers sooner rather than later. Laura nodded slowly. Then we need to decide quickly. What are our options? We could try following the instructions, Karen suggested, but we'd need to run simulations first. Test the process in a controlled environment to minimize risks. And if that fails, Hughes pressed. Then we neutralize the fragments completely, Karen said firmly. It's not ideal, but it's safer than leaving them active. Hughes exhaled sharply, weighing the options. Finally, he turned to Greg. Can your team set up a simulation chamber? Something isolated where we can test this without endangering the ship? Greg nodded. Yeah, I can rig something up using the auxiliary systems. It'll take a few hours though. Do it, Hughes ordered. In the meantime, keep working on decoding the rest of the message. We need as much information as possible before we proceed. As Greg left to begin preparations, Hughes turned back to Karen. Good work. Keep me updated. Later that day, the simulation chamber was ready. Located in a secure section of the engineering bay, it consisted of a reinforced containment unit connected to a series of diagnostic tools. Inside, the fragments were transferred from their isolated subsystem into a virtual environment, designed to mimic the ship's quantum shielding system. Karen monitored the process closely, her hands hovering over the controls as the simulation began. On the main display, streams of data flowed across the screen, showing how the fragments interacted with the simulated shield. At first, everything appeared stable. The fragments integrated smoothly, enhancing the system's efficiency without causing disruptions. But then, something unexpected happened. The energy output spiked dramatically, overwhelming the simulation's safeguards. Alarms blared as the chamber's walls vibrated with the force of the surge. Shut it down, Greg shouted, rushing to the console. Karen worked frantically to terminate the simulation, but the fragments resisted, adapting to every attempt to deactivate them. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like the entire experiment would spiral out of control. Finally, with a burst of static, the simulation collapsed, leaving the chamber dark and silent. Everyone froze, holding their breath as they waited to see if there would be any lasting damage. After a tense pause, Greg checked the diagnostics. We're okay, he announced, relief evident in his voice. The chamber held no breaches. Karen slumped in her chair, her hands shaking slightly. That was too close. The fragments, they're smarter than we thought. They anticipated every move we made. Hughes entered the room, having heard the commotion. Report. Karen summarized what had happened, her voice steady, despite her exhaustion. The upgrade process works to a point, but the fragments are unpredictable. They adapt faster than we can counteract them. If we tried this on the actual shield, it could destroy the ship. Hughes frowned, deep in thought. So we're back to square one. Neutralizing them is the only safe option. Not necessarily, Karen countered. There's still more to the message. If I can decode the rest, I might find a way to stabilize the process. Hughes hesitated, torn between caution and the potential rewards of success. Finally, he nodded. You've got until tomorrow morning. After that, we neutralize the fragments. Understood? Yes, sir, Karen replied, determination flashing in her eyes. As night fell, Karen returned to the lab, her mind racing with possibilities. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure wasn't an option. Humanity's future depended on finding a solution, not just for the Dauntless, but for the countless encounters that lay ahead in the vastness of space. Outside the ship, the stars twinkled coldly, indifferent to the struggles of the humans aboard. Yet within the confines of the Dauntless, hope burned brightly, fueled by the resilience and ingenuity of its crew. And somewhere deep within the alien fragments, the faint pulse of intelligence continued, waiting to reveal its secrets or unleash its power.